Hey there, in this tutorial you will learn how to track visibility of almost any website element using Google Tag Manager. By the end of this video, you will learn how visibility triggers work, how to target any website element using CSS selector, and how to use advanced settings for more flexibility. Before we dive into the setup, let's take a moment to understand how visibility triggers work in Google Tag Manager. As the name states, visibility trigger fires once specified element is visible on the page. And by visible, I mean the area in the web browser which is shown to the visitor and is part of the page. That area is called a viewport. We can instruct GTM to monitor visibility of provided element using CSS selectors and element IDs. Once selected element appears in the viewable browser area, an event will be triggered. Unless element is in the visible area of the browser, no event will be sent. Your element can appear in browser viewport and be visible to Google Tag Manager in several ways. When page initially loads, when element is scrolled into the viewport, when page tab is opened and focused, so very similar to initial page load, and when element becomes visible using a script. For example, a pop-up is shown when you try to leave the page. So if element appears in the browser in any of those ways, GTM is able to capture this event. Now let's go through the trigger setup process. Go to Triggers, create new one, click on Trigger Configuration, and under User Engagement find Element Visibility. When selected, you will see following settings by default, and we will take a look at how and when to use each one of them. For this trigger to work, you need to provide either an ID or CSS selector of an element that you want to monitor. The easiest way to find those values is by inspecting your website in the Browser Developer Console. On your website, right-click on the element that you want to track in the browser and select Inspect. In my testing website, I want to track visibility of this promo banner, and I'm using Google Chrome right now, but you will see a similar option in other major browsers as well. Developer Console will open and highlight our element in the code. Here, you need to double check if the selection actually represents the whole block that should trigger the visibility event. Often website elements are made from multiple smaller items like links or icons or text. So if you want to capture the whole block, you need to go up the node tree and find the closest parent element that contains all of the smaller components. And you will notice that currently inspected element is usually highlighted in the Chrome. So as I'm highlighting any of the elements here, you can see they're highlighted inside the browser as well, which makes it easier to follow which elements is being selected. So in my example, I want to trigger visibility once the whole promo banner is seen. So I will pick the closest parent element, which is this section tag. You can see the whole promo banner is highlighted here. Now we need to take a look at what parameters are available for targeting this block. In perfect scenario, your element would contain an ID parameter, and you can find it under your element as an ID equals some value. So in my example, I have ID value of home promo. So in case you're lucky and you have an ID parameter, you can just copy it and add it to your trigger settings. Make sure selection method is ID, and you can paste here your ID value. And this will be enough for GTM to understand that you want to track visibility of element with the given ID. However, when searching for an ID attribute, make sure that you are looking specifically for ID, otherwise it won't work. For example, if I would copy this data ID, then the trigger would not fire. So always double check that your attribute is actually only ID. In most cases, you won't have an ID attribute for your element, and then we need to get creative with CSS selectors. You will need to search either for unique class or other attribute to tell GTM what element to target. The easiest option is to look for unique values under the class attribute. You can see I have a lot of class names here, but they are not unique and are being used in other elements. For example, element selector, element top section, etc. Then we have something that looks more unique, like Elementor, element, and some ID number. And you could try to use that. But with this, I'm always careful as we don't know if those IDs can change when page is edited, because this is added by website CMS automatically. For example, there might be a scenario when you set up a visibility trigger and it works for some time, but if somebody edits this block, this ID could change, so it will break your visibility trigger, so we need to use something that is not changing when the website is edited. So after looking more, I have a better option here. It's called Home Sale Promo, and it should be unique for this element. And we can check that easily by searching in the console. I will copy this value. Then, while being in the developer console, click Ctrl F or Command F to open search and paste your value here. If this value is unique for your page, you should see only one match. Be sure not to skip this step to make sure that visibility trigger is fired for the expected element. If more than one elements are matched, you should search for other class names or other attributes. If you don't have a unique class name or ID and you're using Website Builder, then you could try to add those even manually from UI. For example, in WordPress, there is an Elementor plugin where this can be done very easily. And there are a lot of other options for WordPress or other systems as well. If you can't add unique attribute even with developer help, then you can try to do research on more advanced CSS selectors and still try target element using more complex queries. Check video description for a CSS selector documentation with more useful and advanced examples from Mozilla. So when you have a class name, copy that and go back to trigger settings. Make sure that you select CSS selector option here and paste your class name here. Since this is a class name, you will need to add a dot before your class name. It's important to add a dot, otherwise CSS selector won't work. To avoid tracking unintended items, you might want to additionally limit visibility triggers to fire only on a specific page. For example, I have a banner only on the home page, so I might want to limit this trigger only for that page. And you can do that by clicking on some visibility events, select page path, equals, and in my case it will be homepage. Additional thing that you should be aware that there might be differences in layout and available attributes between desktop and mobile screen sizes, so make sure to check those separately in the inspect mode. You can toggle between devices in developer console's left top corner. Make sure that mobile device or responsive size is selected and then refresh the page. Now what you should check if your element that you have tracked contains same parameters that you used for targeting. For example, in my case, I should check either for the ID of home promo, I can see it's still here, or for the class name that I used in CSS selector. In my case, it was home sale promo. And if you see the same values, then you don't need to do anything. It will be tracked the same way on mobile as on desktop. If you, however, see some differences, you might need to adjust your CSS selector or use other ID value. Now, once we have provided a selector and limited that to a set of pages, we have a couple of additional options. You can control how many times a trigger is fired on the same page when an element matches a given selector. If you keep this option to a default once per page, a trigger will fire only once even if multiple elements with the same CSS selectors are visible in the viewport. For example, if visitor scrolls my banner into viewport 3 times, then event will be triggered only for the first time. Same will be true if you have 3 elements with same class names. Only first one will trigger an event. Then you have an option to limit that once per element. In combination with CSS selectors, the trigger will fire once for each element matching the given selector. So similar example, if you have 3 banner blocks with the same class name of home sale promo, and you scroll past all of them, trigger will fire 3 times. However, if you see same 3 banners once more, no additional events will be sent. And the last option, as the name states, trigger will fire each time matched element is visible in the viewport. Same example, if you have 3 blocks with same CSS selectors, home sale promo, and you scroll past all of them, trigger will fire 3 times. And then, if you scroll them out of the visible area and then scroll back in, trigger will fire 3 more times, and so on. So you will have 6 events in total. There are also a couple of advanced options here. With minimum visibility percentage, you can set how much of element area should be visible on the screen to trigger an event. For example, if you enter 100%, then the whole element should be visible before trigger fires. Then you can also set a minimum on-screen duration in milliseconds before event is sent. Visibility duration counts the total time element was visible on the same page. If the page reloads, it will reset the timer. For example, if an element is visible for 3 seconds, then hidden from the viewport and then visible again for 10 more seconds, then the total on-screen duration will be 13 seconds or 13,000 milliseconds. In this case, trigger will fire only if the minimum on-screen duration is set to 13,000 milliseconds or less. That is, of course, if this setting is enabled. Observe DOM changes will be useful if the target element appears on the page using JavaScript after the initial page load. Such elements won't be visible to GTM unless you pick this option. For example, it would be useful if you submit a form that shows some kind of success message on the same page. You can then target the success message CSS selector and use Observe DOM changes setting to trigger an event. For both Observe DOM changes and minimum on-screen duration setting, you will see a warning message that this setting may affect your website performance if you are targeting a lot of elements on the website. So before you pick any of those options, make sure that you target one or few elements on your page. Now, once the trigger is configured, you can attach it to any tag and fire a custom event. I will show a quick example how to collect this event using Google Analytics. Let's save the trigger, go to Tags, create new tag, select GA4 event, add your measurement ID, and pick an event name that will be sent when your element is visible. Then attach newly created trigger, name your tag, and save it. Now enable preview mode to test it. On your page, scroll down to the element that you have tracked. Here is my banner. In Tag Assistant, you should see Element Visibility Event. Click on that, and you should see your event tag being fired. Now in Google Analytics, under Admin, Debug View, you should be able to see your incoming event in a few moments. So I have it right here. You can see we have Home Promo Scene event that we have just now added through GTM. And that's how you track element visibility in Google Tag Manager. This was a simple example, and there could be additional challenges that you need to overcome in some edge cases, but I hope that you have learned something new and you feel more confident using visibility trigger in Google Tag Manager. If you found this useful, like this video and subscribe to Easy Segment to see more similar tutorials in the future.